Mention elephants or conservation in North Thailand, and one name comes to mind: John Roberts. He's the Group Director of Sustainability at Minor Hotels, and today he's with us. We're at the wonderful Ritz-Carlton Residences Bangkok at Mahanakorn Tower, and you are watching Trends. John, thanks for being with us here today. What are you doing up in North Thailand?
Well, I originally went to run an elephant camp for the Anantara Golden Triangle, which I still kind of do, but now we have a great team of people who are doing the day-to-day management. And now from there, they let me stay up there. I am actually Group Director for Sustainability and Conservation for the Minor Group, nominally globally, but wherever they need me, really.
And what have you set as your sustainability goals for 2024?
Well, we came out of COVID, I think, like a lot of hotel groups around the world, and everything was all over the place. So our goal at the moment really is to bring everything back to where it should be. We have some hotels with excellent sustainability performance, and we have some hotels around the world who are, let's say, catching up. So we've gone back to 24 sustainable, absolute basics brand standards that we need to have, first for Anantara, then we're going to move into Avani. And they're all designed to help us, the miners' overarching goal, to help us get net zero by 2050. So things like, some of the things that have always been in there, reduction and eventually elimination, should be elimination, but it's going to be more difficult than people think, of single-use plastic, front of house, first, and then working on the back of house. Things like getting serious about food waste. We have, again, some great chefs who are really serious, but putting some formal things in place. A lot around energy, water, and waste. But basically, things that we've set, the absolute basics that we need to have in place across the board before we then go on to some of the, we're encouraging people to go on anyway, but before we then go on to have brand standards around renewable energy, around some of the more ambitious things.
John, do you think Thailand's hotel industry at large can be sustainable? Because there's a lot of greenwashing around, isn't there?
Well, I mean, I tend to think of greenwashing as being a deliberate act. There's a lot of
marketing.
Yes, a lot of marketing and misunderstanding around what is sustainable and what's not sustainable and everything else. A lot of things that are being promoted that aren't don't make a huge impact towards the decarbonisation or all those other goals. I think it can. I think it will need, it'll take a few years to get there. I think it'll need some more political will. I think it'll need a bit of driving towards certification for the Global Sustainable Tourism Council certifications. It has to. We all have to.
Yeah. Are minor guests driving also this quest for sustainability? Do you find that more and more guests are saying, we want to stay in a sustainable checklist hotel rather than price driven?
A growing percentage, but not yet huge, not yet large enough. A lot actually is coming from travel agents, from businesses particularly based in Europe who are getting the European directives about their supply chains. And also from investors into the company, not necessarily into the hotels, but into the company. So a lot of our efforts are also stock market driven. So that's the pressure for now, but it's growing as time goes on. And people do notice the indicators if we have a hotel that somehow has snuck single-use plastic bottles back in, which they shouldn't do.
A lot have actually.
Yeah.
I've seen that post-COVID, hotels that were on glass now have got plastic back in the mix. Not your hotels, but sadly other hotels.
Some of them.
And
yes.
It's like 2 steps ahead and 1 step back.
Plastic bottles are one of the ones that they sneak in. I've been spent, I think 2008 we said no more plastic bottles in the rooms, and they sneak back in here and there. They're just so convenient. But anyway, the guests are noticing these indicators, which is really useful. We have a question on our guest satisfaction survey, and we have 2 questions based around sustainability, one on single-use plastic specifically, and one on conservation and wildlife. And I get to see the answers to those globally every week, so I know who's sneaking them back in. But guests are noticing them, and we're getting some great suggestions of alternatives and everything else from guests. So it's growing, but I think mainly being industry driven now, a lot on the European directives.
And on the conservation side, how are we doing with regard to the elephants in Thailand? Because years ago I've seen some horrendous elephant parks south of Thailand, catering to the Chinese, and those poor elephants, the way that they were looked after was appalling. Are we making headroad in Thailand to disengage on these riding an elephant and elephants painting and all of this terrible activity, and being more viewing elephants in nature?
We're definitely heading in that direction, although I will put the caveat in there that painting can be trained nicely. We don't do it, but it can be done, so it's not necessarily terrible. If you see elephant painting, don't necessarily get up in arms about it, but there are things, everything is moving to a more natural idea. Also, again, as with the sustainability side of things, there are people now starting to audit for welfare. So what's going on back of house, there's an independent company, and also now the Department of Livestock Development has a set of guidelines. IUCN has a set of guidelines as well. So we're beginning to audit, we're moving in that direction. So far, the parks where the worst things happened, it's not necessarily inbound tourists, or it's not necessarily one particular country driving it. It's just designed for the large group tours, and most recently they just happened to come from China, those guests. But it's been that way and I think, in a way, although many people in the tourism industry won't agree with me, but from an elephant perspective, the large group tourism that those parks were set up to cater to hasn't come back yet. And so the people who are coming to Thailand now are not in the large groups. They have more time to spend looking at elephants, observing them in nature. So that makes actually the observation of elephants in a place that's happier for elephants the better business model as well, which really helps.
So there's still a place for elephants in tourism, in the tourism experience, but more of a sort of natural-based environment?
Well, yes, I think so. We still have the same...
Because you still have your elephant camp associated with Anantara, don't you?
Yes, we do. So,
and how many elephants do you have?
That's 20, up to 20 now. Yeah, exactly. Well, it was, when we were rescuing elephants, it was about 40, but now it's 20, which is a nice number, and it does allow us to play with giving them more space, friendship groups, and all the natural settings, which is something that we've evolved over the years, from being, when we set out in 2003, we were just, I guess, a riding camp, and then we've evolved all the way along. But now it's actually not only better for the elephants, it's also a better business model as well. So it's all working well. And I think, to go back to the original question, there still has to be a place in tourism for elephants, because the fact remains, and it's been the same argument, as there's almost 4,000 elephants in captivity in Thailand, and Africa does it well. I always say elephants should be this, where you go on safari and you see the elephants, and people have enjoyed watching elephants for decades in Africa. Why can't we have that as enjoying an elephant, so the elephant's in its natural environment? But then, having said that, a lot of these elephants have come from captivity or an ownership where they are used to an enclosed environment, aren't they? Well, they're used to an enclosed environment, and I mean, because there are 4,000 of them in captivity already, and the national parks where there are, it's first of all, it's illegal to release elephants into a national park, and then the only people doing it are the royal family, but everybody else, you couldn't do it. But also, there isn't enough space to release 4,000 elephants suddenly out into the forest, and there are a good population of wild elephants already in Thailand. So wildlife viewing can be done. Elephants can be fairly easily seen in a nicer setting in Koi Buri National Park. Khao Yai is a bit crowded with people. There's a lot of conflict inside and outside the park at the moment. But wild elephants can be seen as well from the distance. But Thailand's problem, if you like, if it were to look at the African side of things, is having 4,000 elephants already in captivity and nowhere to put them, and relying on people for food, relying on people for basically everything that they need. So it's the solution has to be there somewhere.
And what journey did you go through to come to Thailand? How did you end up in northern Thailand?
I have a degree in material science and engineering, which I never used. But then to travel the world, back in those days, people didn't charge you to volunteer. So I started volunteering at Guadalupe Mountain National Park in Texas immediately after leaving university. So West Texas, I came from England, very, very crowded island. I wanted to go and see space, see the stars, see everything else. Then went to Northern Australia, again, working and volunteering in the park services up there. And then in 1999, I landed in Nepal at a place called Tiger Tops, which many people have heard of, very famous place, and basically spent 5 years there learning about Asian jungles, Asian wildlife, but also about how to use, it was one of the first places outside Africa to combine hospitality with conservation, with research. Basically, Jim Edwards and Chuck McDougall wanted to study tigers. They didn't want to do it living in a tent and do it uncomfortably, so they took over a lodge that was formerly a hunting lodge and said, okay, we will entertain guests, we will live comfortably as well, but we will also explain guests about the jungle, and that will fund our conservation and our research. And that seems to be a very good business model, and it's one I try to bring across to Anantara and to on a global scale, which works in some places.
And in 2024, why should I and my audience pack our bags and head to northern Thailand and stay at Anantara and enjoy whatever is around? What's the attractions?
Well, Chiang Rai at the moment, you should come before April because we have the Biennale going on. Thailand Biennale public. It's
huge.
It's huge. It's all over. I don't know how many sites there are all over the town, all over the province, but there's lots of great international and national Thai art there. So it's definitely worth coming to that, and then you could build a whole trip around things to see. For other things, I think it's
the culture's different to what somebody might experience in Bangkok or going to Phuket or the Southern Islands.
It's definitely in northern Thailand, people have their own. It's a separate culture. They have their own language. They have their own traditions, architecture. Lanna Kingdom, as it's known, which was Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai, that is certainly something definitely to come and see. And also green, open spaces, mountainous. There are a variety of different peoples as well who've migrated in there over the year who are not Thai. They're Thai citizens for the most part, but they've come in from various places and made their livings up in the mountains, whereas when the Thai people were living on the rice paddies. So there's a great mix of cultures there, and it's a few degrees cooler than Bangkok as well. So it's quite nice. It's currently raining this evening, but when the rain clears, it'll be nice and cool and fresh and bright again.
And my final question, what advice, tips, little steps can we take in order to be a bit more sustainable this year for the audience and myself? What can we do to take those little sustainable steps?
Well, I tell you what I'm doing. I've just, sometime last year, I discovered this app called A World. And it seems funny to say it's an app, but every day it allows you to log what you've done, and it gives you points for turning the tap off when you're showering. It gives you points for, it actually just this weekend started recording movement. So if I take the BTS here, I get 10 points. It also tells me how much carbon I burn if I take a taxi, but it doesn't reduce points. So A World is a great app. I tend to live quite sustainably anyway. We've got solar panels on the roof and all the other things. I try and walk the talk. But this has got me doing a few other little habits, extra points for a vegetarian meal and things like that. So I would highly recommend that to people, A World, the app. When it comes to travel, as I say, there's a lot of marketing around. But I think if you want to travel sustainably, have a look for certified properties, Global Sustainable Tourism Council certifications on your properties, on your travel. And also, if you're traveling, you're choosing a travel agent, look for someone who's Travel Life, that's also GSTC certified. So look for the certification rather than just at the marketing. The marketing's lovely as well, but look for certification. Booking.com, if you're on Booking.com, and several of the OTAs have this, but I happen to use that one. Look for 3 green leaves because they're pretty good. That means you've got the certification as well. And you can actually have a toggle on Booking.com now where you say you only search for 3 green leaf properties.
Great advice. Keep up the great work in sustainability and all that you're doing within Minor Group and further afield in northern Thailand and around Thailand. And brilliant. I'm in awe of the commitment you have towards sustainability. Thank you for coming here today on Trends.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching this latest episode. If you like the conversation, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.